come from a publishing family, and I literally grew up with books. And when I think about that now, that's quite unusual, right? There's not a very strong reading culture amongst children. And I feel really lucky and really privileged to have been able to have that. So I grew up reading, and I grew up surrounded by books. And I remember my dad telling me, reading adds to knowledge. And I'd be like, oh yeah, so boring, right? But there is so much truth in that.
So what was it like for you growing up? Did you wake up and read a book? How was it treated such that now it was part of you?
So first of all, my dad was always reading. Then he used to give us small little assignments to try and read, and maybe an edited book for him. Of course, me and my sisters, we weren't very good editors, right? But the whole concept of reading, then we would read stories, right? We would read bedtime stories. And that, as a child, has stayed with me throughout my life. Till now, I read bedtime stories. It's part of my daily routine. I can't go to sleep without reading a book. Whether I read 5 pages, 10 pages, it doesn't matter what kind of day I've had, doesn't matter how tired I am, I have to read. And that kind of culture, I feel, is what we need to start making sure that we get into our children from an early age.
Right.
From an early age. So they grow up and it's normalized. Reading is just part of their daily routine. Reading is just something they do without even thinking about it.
Right.
And reading for joy, for pleasure, for enjoying that experience, for feeding your imagination. We're very much about reading for educational purposes. I need to pass an exam. I need to cram.
Right.
That's when people think about reading, yeah? When you tell people reading, they think about school, education.
So it just becomes this exhausting thing that you have to do.
Exactly. It becomes work.
Right.
Right? And reading for pleasure. Reading for all the benefits, the holistic benefits that reading gives you.
Right.
And when you start at a young age, now I have 2 small children, the same thing. I read to them from months old. They were reading, we were reading stories, right? And when children are young, it helps so much with their development, with their vocabulary. My daughter, who's a bit older, she took to reading like a duck to water. She was just, she was really engrossed in the pictures from the beginning.
Right.
My son, he's playing, he's throwing something in the beginning. I'm trying to read him. He was just all over the place. But being consistent about it, now he sits, reads, listens to the story. Right. Just following the same routine. It's helping with his vocabulary, it's helping with his imagination, and those are the things that I think we need to just start embedding in our children.
Right. And children, in essence, they're looking up to the adults.
Yeah.
But looking at the Kenyan population and the reading, that not many people read books.
No.
And I know we have been encouraged from time to time just to read more, even improve the way we talk out there, even in interviews.
Yeah.
Because HR practitioners say people can be a bit wanting, though they answer questions even during an interview.
Yes.
And all because perhaps there's not much of building the vocabulary.
Yes.
So as a general public, how can we get to read more? What avenues can help us as Kenyans just to read more books?
There are so many avenues out there, and actually there's a growing cohort of Kenyan authors writing children's books, writing literature, and I think this is where it comes to sort of building homegrown content, right? And African, but I will even say Kenyan stories. Reading, I think it can be intimidating if it's one big thing there, right? And people tell me, oh, I don't like reading, I find it so... Find the content that works for you. I like reading those kind of murder mystery, detective stories. I really enjoy those. I have another friend of mine who just likes reading autobiographies. She likes following people's life stories. My husband likes reading nonfiction books. There are people who like reading comics.
Right.
Find the content that speaks to you, because we say people don't read, yet I bet they're there on social media. They can spend 2 hours reading that content, right? And it's channeling that into books.
Okay.
Into books. Channeling what's your interest? What's your interest, and how do you find that in content that can build and help your communication skills as opposed to spending it on the screen.
Okay, so find out what interests you.
What interests
That's the first
you?
step.
Yes. There's a lot of diversity. And actually, a lot about Supaliso is diversity in the content that we're reading. You know, there's a lot of stories by Kenyan authors that are fun. There's a lot of diverse content out there. So when you say, I don't like reading, I'm challenging you. Have you really gone and looked at what is out there to read? Have
Right.
you? Have you seen the variety that is out there in the bookshops to read?
Right.
You know, and there is something there that will interest.
Right. And the era of technology,
Yeah.
then a lot of even books
Yeah.
are now made into movies, into documentaries.
Yeah.
And you see, then that will make people be like, I can watch the movie, so I don't have to read the book.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the difference? Do we still have to read the book if the book is going to be changed into a movie?
I mean, to me, that's a very personal taste kind of thing. Because even sometimes I'm like that. If the movie finds me before the book, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'll enjoy the book. And if I read the book and I really like the book, I don't know if I'm going to enjoy the movie, right? But there are so many books, you know, there's so many that is maybe, by the time content is going into production, you know, it's a very kind of mainstream or well-known book.
Right.
But there is a lot out there that is not yet mainstream. There's a lot out there that is very, very interesting. There's a lot out there that is very fun, that can still interest children and can still interest adults.
Right. And looking at the holiday
Yes.
that children have had 2 months, actually.
know.
They're still at home, almost going back to school. But looking at all this time they had,
Yeah.
there are a lot of kids who, parents struggle to get their kids even outdoor.
Yeah.
Because they want to watch.
Sit on the screen.
Yes, and
Yeah.
just be on the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Or watch Nickelodeon, a lot of cartoon. So then, a lot of screen time,
Yeah.
but not much on books.
Not much on
At least there's not much even holiday assignment.
Yes.
So it means there's a lot of
Yeah.
leisure time.
Yeah.
So how constructively can parents just make their kids use their time
Yeah.
and perhaps inculcate reading in between?
So the one thing I'll say, you know, I know parents are busy. I get it. You know, you're working, you've got kids, school. But I think it is really important to read with your children.
Right.
Even if you just find 5 minutes, 10 minutes to read something with them, that makes the difference. You know, and telling them, go to your room, read that book I bought you. You know, you don't know what they're going to do when they get to their room, right? But even the experience of doing something with them, seeing what they are reading, you know, when they're on the screen time, you don't know what they're watching sometimes, you know, or how that is influencing their thoughts and ideas. But when you're reading with them, you can see how the content that they're reading is influencing their minds.
Right.
Yeah? And if you sit and take that time, even just 5 minutes, to read something with them together, enjoy the story together, and start being consistent about it, that creates a shift. Then suddenly they start getting interested.
Right. So then parents have to be very intentional.
Parents have to be intentional.
Right.
If it's what you want, it doesn't just happen. It has to be intentional. If you haven't started from very young, then it has to be intentional.
Right. And there is a concern for a few parents that they are not the most perhaps literate.
Yeah.
And now when you have young kids,
Yeah.
the young kids who know a lot of things these days.
Yeah.
So the kids could even be smarter than the parent
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
So then for them, reading is a bit of a challenge. So how can they be of help to their children?
So they're these, I see them, these kind of learn to read books. Like now my daughter's 5, she's learning how to read. For simple stories, I tell her, read it to me.
Right.
She sits there, she gets her book, she starts reading. Slowly, she says the words out sometimes if she's struggling, and from what she's, you know, the phonics, she spells it out, you can get, oh, cuckoo, or
Right.
something, right? But she can read it to me. She can read it to me, and that's another way of enjoying the experience together.
Okay.
Then she's learning, right? She's learning, and you are still there supporting her, even if your reading ability is not at the same level. But you're encouraging hers. right? You're giving her space to read and you're giving her space to teach you.
Right.
So you get on that journey together. So she sits, she reads to me, she goes slowly, she has one favorite story, she reads it, and by the end, she's so happy.
Right.
She's so happy. You sit there, you let her take her time, let her do it in her own way. And there's just so many different ways to make it fun, but she really feels like she's achieved something at the end. You know, she's so happy with herself. I've done it. I read my storybook myself.
Which is very important.
It's very important.
Right.
Yeah.
And looking at her children work best when there is some form of routine.
Yes.
So what time would you say is ideal for the story reading before perhaps they go to bed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer in routine, and I know different parents have different ways of doing things, but for me, it works. And reading is part of the bedtime routine. So before bed, we'd read a bedtime story. They get to choose the story they want to read. We read it together. For my daughter who's learning to read, sometimes she'll want to read her story, then myself and my husband reads her a story. My son, we read him a story. And you know, it's amazing how much they absorb from what they read.
Right.
And I think we underestimate that. You know, a couple of days later, my son will come and tell me something that he read in one of the books. I'm like, I don't know, you know, he's quiet throughout the whole book, but he's listening, he's absorbing, right? Mm-hmm. So bedtime works because it's easiest to keep it consistent. Yeah. And now, before they're going to bed, they're like, story, story, story. It's normal. You know, you can't put them to bed without a story.
So, and how long is the story then? Because again, for the concentration span.
Yeah.
So how long is the story, or how long should the story be?
Oh, I mean, you're not reading for very long, right? You're reading for like 10, 15 minutes at max. And if like Super Lisu is for an older age bracket than my children, we're not going to read it all in one sitting. We'll read a few pages, get their bookmarks, very excited. We'll pick up the story tomorrow at the chapter that they've reached. And then you read it over a few days. But just something where you've got them enough attention, read it's a short story that gets them from beginning to end, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not a lot of time, it's just being deliberate about it.
Okay. And the Bible is you don't have to read it physically, you can actually just listen to it.
Yeah.
So there's that concept as well.
Yes.
That you could listen to a book as opposed to flipping the pages or scrolling as you read it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's also a personal preference. Like the Bible has such wonderful short stories, and especially like children's Bibles.
Right.
They have lovely pictures in them. So for children, you know, a lot of what they gravitate towards are the illustrations. Yeah. So when they're listening, it's not the same visual effect, right? For adults, you don't need the images so much. So like listening is fine. Or maybe as children grow older, the listening is fine. But to get them interested at this young age, from an early age, the pictures are really a big part of that experience. You know, looking at the visuals, getting excited, it brings it to life in a different way, you know. So for me, I think for young kids and getting them interested, getting them engaged, the visuals are really an important part of that experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you say then that reading from an early age for children, then it can help a parent even identify any of those reading challenges, like say dyslexia and those many other issues that come with reading?
I think that you'll be, so dyslexia is a bit, I think you'll be able to engage with your children's ability at whatever level that they are at. And you will become a bit more informed and a bit more in tune about what your child is struggling with at school, what she's maybe good at, right? He or she. I think it just gives you a bit more of an insight to your child's ability at whatever level they're at. Now, for things like that, you may have to go and see a professional, but you might pick up on something during that moment that says, I'm not sure. Let me talk to the teacher about how she reads in school. Let me talk to the teacher if she struggles with particular words or phrases, you know what I mean? So it just gives you a bit more of an insight into your child's learning ability. We don't spend the day with them in school. We don't know, how that day goes. So in those 5-10 minutes of reading with them, you can get quite a lot from your child's learning abilities.
Okay. And the language to use, the English books,
Yeah.
the Kiswahili books,
Yeah.
and perhaps if the kid knows any other language, could
Yeah.
be French,
Yeah.
could be Chinese,
Yeah.
and whatever. So what are your books in what language?
So the Supelisu or...
No, let's start with Supelisu.
So Supelisu is in English.
Right.
It has some Swahili words mixed up in there, which are translated throughout the book.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a comic style book for ages around 6 to 11 years to read on their own. But the illustrations, they're deliberately like comic, they're quite fun, done by some Kenyan illustrators called the Tsunami Studio. And they've really brought it to life in a really fun and creative way, so younger kids can enjoy the pictures quite a lot.
Right. So the few Swahili words that you say is for it to suit our market, because that's how we speak.
Yes.
We put a few Kiswahili words here and there.
Yes.
Okay.
A few Kiswahili words here and there. Supeliso, I really wanted a story that is urban living in a Kenyan city, right? Kind of modern, fun, how we speak. We may speak English, but we throw in some words here and there, really bringing the day-to-day city living vibe of a young girl in school to life.
Right.
Yeah.
So you see exactly, you can relate with it.
You can
and
relate
it's not something that is a very foreign concept.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so what about books in other languages as well?
Yeah, I think there's a big push to have books in another language. And I think that's so important because we've lost a lot of that, right? And I'm really excited when I see that coming back, taking pride in local language books,
Right.
Taking pride in them, looking for them, and again, reading them with your kids, So much of, history, it's all about who tells the story. It's all about who tells the story.
Right.
And as you grow older, you realize that. And at one point, I was like, oh my goodness, you know what? We can tell our own stories. We can tell our own stories. We can tell our stories that we want our children to read and be inspired by. We can tell our own stories. And that was a big driver for me in writing Supelisu. They are reading books that come from all over, and what they are associating with fun, cool, all these kind of superhero type books or images in their mind. The image of a superhero does not look like them and does not come from here.
Right.
Because that's what they see. That's the content that feeds them, right? Heroes, superheroes, strength, courage, fun.
That is all they want to see.
That's all they want to see. And where do they get that from? So subconsciously, it's embedding that, okay, all that cool stuff happens way over there, not here.
Okay.
And I was like, you know what? We can tell our own stories. We can bring that cool stuff here. Why not?
Right.
Why not?
In our own way.
In our own way.
Make it very relatable.
Yes.
Right. And we do have to take a very short break. Remember our conversation this morning, we were talking about nurturing a reading culture in children. The hashtag is the morning drift. We take that break. Don't go too far.
Vera Beauty and Fashion College is focused on being the leading technical and vocational training institute in the region. Our team possesses in-depth knowledge and extensive experience in the industry, offering thorough training in cosmetology, hairdressing, interior design, creative arts, training of trainers, nail technology, and fashion design. With branches in Nairobi, Thika, Meru, Eldoret, and now in Mombasa, our courses ensure that learners are completely equipped with knowledge, competency, and employability skills. Enroll today to be a part of a center of excellence.
Mwangi's Institute of Cosmetology. We are TVET and NITA approved training institute in the following courses: School of Hairdressing and Beauty Therapy, School of Fashion Design, Event Management and Decoration, School of Interior Design and Beadwork, School of Advanced Nail Technology, and School of Makeup Artistry. We are located at Kim's Plaza, Equity Bank Building, 4th floor, Oginga Odinga Street, Eldoret. Call us on 0715-046-499 or email us at mwangiscosmetologyinstitute@gmail.com. Mwangi's Institute of Cosmetology, empowering tomorrow's generation today.
While you are watching The Morning Drift, my name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiaga. Thank you very much for taking your time to join us this morning. I am not alone. I am with Nancy Nelima, since it is a Tuesday. Nancy, how are you doing?
Good morning, and good morning to our viewers from wherever you're watching us from. This is The Morning Drift, coming to you across all our social media platforms where we are at Lookuptv. The hashtag is The Morning Drift, and we've got you covered on all stories that are making headlines.
Yeah, depends. If from that side, it's just the way that you say it, yeah? I mean, for Kenyans who want a peace and for
Vera Beauty and Fashion College is focused on being the leading technical and vocational training institute in the region. Our team possesses in-depth knowledge and extensive experience in the industry, offering thorough training in cosmetology, hairdressing, interior design, creative arts, training of trainers, nail technology, and fashion design. With branches in Nairobi, Thika, Meru, Eldoret, and now in Mombasa, our courses ensure that learners are completely equipped with knowledge, competency, and employability skills. Enroll today to be a part of a center of excellence.
And welcome back. This is The Morning Drift. Nancy Nelima here, and the hashtag is The Morning Drift, and across all our social media platforms where we are at Lookuptv. This morning we're talking about reading, and more specifically inculcating the reading culture in our children. With me on set is Yolanda Chakava, who is the author of Supalisu. Yes, Yolanda. And now let's talk about the books.
Yay!
That are right here in front of us.
Yes.
And Super Lisu.
Yes.
First of all, Super Lisu.
Yes.
Where does it come from?
Lisu means hair. And when I visit schools, I'm giving you now one of my secrets that I challenge the children. I say, hair in which language?
Ah, yes. In which language? Because that is not English, that is not Kiswahili.
I have them guessing. It's not English. It's one of the tribes in Kenya. And I hope none of the schools I'm visiting are going to watch this. But it's hair in Luya.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying even the super here, this is like a comb.
Yes. Yes. So this is the first book called My Super Hair.
Right.
That came out just at the end of 2021.
Okay.
And this is the first book about Kendi. She lives in Nairobi with her dad.
Right.
And one day she has an unexpected encounter and discovers that she has superpowers. And the powers come from her natural hair.
Whoa.
And different hairstyles give her different superpowers.
Sounds so interesting.
So she has like 5 different superpowers that come from her hair. And this is basically her journey of discovery. We are introduced to Super Lisu as a heroine, basically. And then the second book, which you have, is called The Locust Attack. It just came out last month, and it's currently Textbook Center Kids Club Book of the Month.
Wow.
And here it's Super Lisu in action. You know, she's got her first mission. Desert locusts attack Kenya.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Desert locusts.
Very relatable.
Very relatable, and I think this is a good time for people who don't know about the desert locust. It's such an important part of what is happening in climate change and food security.
Right.
To have those conversations with children in a way they can start
Wow.
understanding what is happening in this country or in East Africa. And Super Lisu rises to the challenge.
It sounds so interesting. Like, I think I need this before I sleep. So, the hairstyle that she changes, she gets different powers.
She gets different powers.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was a couple of things I was very deliberate about Super Lisu. One, the age group. When I decided, I had this idea in my head for a while. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a superhero and power comes from hair? You know, hair is such a big part of our lives.
It is.
We change up our hair all the time. Sometimes people tell me, I didn't recognize you. You changed your hair.
Right.
You know, we can do so many fun, interesting things with our hair. When I was young, I had natural hair, and I really was one of those hardcore natural hair teenagers. At a time, it was not cool. And I used to
everyone was palming their hair.
Everyone was palming my hair, and I was really trying to hold strong with my natural hair. And I used to get teased, your hair is so hard. Why are you walking around with your hair like that? What's wrong with you? Why don't you do your hair? Eventually, I succumbed to peer pressure and permed my hair, and I felt so sad.
Ooh.
Because everyone made me feel like having natural hair was not cool.
Right.
It was not, you know, being your natural self. No, you needed to perm your hair.
Right. And let's talk about even the front page and talk about Kendi.
Yes.
Kendi's hair.
Yes.
And as you can see, it's all the kinks
Yes.
are out
Yeah.
in this big afro.
Yeah.
So why was it important for you to put in it's the definition of an African child?
Yes.
So why was it so important for you to put it out there?
It was important for me because our natural hair is so beautiful. Like, look at all the things that we can do to our hair in its natural state.
Right.
That we can't do otherwise. As soon as I permed my hair, I regretted it. As soon as I did it, you know? And I think it's changing the narrative. Where does this perception come from that natural hair is not cool? Where does this perception come from that we need to have that straight, flowy hair? It's changing, it's putting out different stories.
Right.
Different stories that are authentic in how we actually are, and saying, you know what, that's cool. If you want to do something else with your hair, fine. But not feeding a narrative that it's not cool to have natural hair.
Natural hair.
Yeah.
Okay. And this, as I flip through the book, I'm looking at very interesting, interesting images.
Yeah.
So very captivating as well.
Yes.
With all the color.
Yeah.
So this is so that kids can keep their interest.
Yeah, so I targeted the age group specifically,
Right.
preteens, right, 6 to 11. I did some research. I spent a lot of time in bookshops. I went and looked at what content was available for different age groups. And I deliberately went higher than my kids' age, right? I went where I felt like there was the biggest gap
Okay.
in content, where you see black faces on the cover,
Right.
right? Where you see something relatable, like we were saying. That preteen group, a lot of the content they're reading is not from here. It's much harder to find African content in this young readers, preteens age group. And I saw this style and I realized actually this style is what a lot of children are gravitating towards. Cool, they find it cool, they find it fun. These kind of illustrations really engages them.
Yeah.
And a lot of the content they're reading with this type of illustrations is not from here. And I thought, you know what? We can do this here. Everything about this is done here.
Okay.
Done here in Kenya.
And even the quality of the pages is really
Everything
good.
is done here.
Okay.
The illustrations, the printing, wholly produced in Kenya.
Okay.
We can do this. And we have the skills here. So
Right.
it's just
We've
about
got all we
writing our
need.
stories. We have all we need
Right.
and more.
Okay.
You know, I'm one person who, you know, this is very far from like my day life. And I decided that I was going to tell a story. So I think there are other people there who have those ideas and sit with them. I sat with this. I sat with this for a long time. I'm sure there are lots of people with ideas. Sometimes you have an idea and you don't know if your idea is any good. So
Right.
you just sit with it, right? You sit with it for a long time. I sat with this for a long time and I'm really annoyed with myself I sat with it for so long. I'm like, why did I just try? But I did it anyway.
Finally.
You know, it became my COVID project, actually.
Ah.
It became my COVID project to say, you know, I'm going to work on this idea of mine. And I've done it. And I'm happy that I've been able to find a creative way to tell stories to young children that gives them something aspirational, gives them something fun,
Right.
gives them something with that coolness that young people naturally gravitate towards and say, oh, we don't find that stuff in Kenya.
I know.
You can, you do. It's there.
And what about the literature
Yes,
space in the country?
yes.
What are your thoughts on that? Because children rarely interact with that very, let's say, the history, not much.
I mean, I think children get a lot of that in school as well, right? And they have set books and they read African literature books as part of that.
Right.
And I kind of think, there's a lot actually people get out of those set books that stays with them. I found someone who was quoting some Chinua Achebe and they said, oh, that used to be my set book. You know, it's amazing how much people remember and continue reading those authors, African authors who are celebrated African authors throughout their life. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, I mean, we have
Right.
such strong literature, African literature
Ken
writers.
Walibora.
We have them,
Yes.
right? And I guess the question is, do we celebrate them enough? Do we shout out to them enough? Do we say, hey, these are our guys. Are you reading their stories?
Right.
Are you reading their content? You know, are we encouraging our children to read our African literature books?
Okay.
Yeah.
And perhaps what is the publishing of books? Is it tedious? Because I once interacted with a guy who was trying to publish a book.
Yeah.
And he had said the process was no mean feat. So what was your experience
Wow,
like?
so it's a process, right? It's been a whole learning journey for me. Because of course I started with the book, you start the writing and you've done, and when somebody says, this is good, we want to publish it, you're like, yes, my work is done. No, you're just starting. You know, by the time we started the illustrations, this first book especially, how does someone bring your idea to life? You know, it's a real creative, co-creative process, the illustrations. And then it's a very rigorous process.
Right.
And I think when you see something that has been published, I now appreciate what people go through, from the editing, from each line being scrutinized, from an editor's perspective, making sure it's grammatically correct, making sure the alignment is correct, the attention to detail that goes in the small details that you underestimate. That's where the time goes, you know. And I got an editor, a really good editor, to help me even just think through some parts of the story that they weren't quite sure about. Fantastic, you know. I really kind of appreciated that, sort of having that peer contribution to shape it into something that we were all really happy with.
Right.
And then there was the point of introducing Super Lisa to the market. So the one thing is in saying, oh, I want to target this age group, I want to bring something different to this age group. But then it's also introducing a new product to the market, right?
Very true.
Which came with its own different challenges. Right? Where do you put it in the bookstore? There was a bit of confusion. Where do we put this book?
Let's talk about those challenges. Let's talk about those challenges. So, yeah, again, in the market.
Yeah.
So how was it for you?
I think, you know, initially we have this thing that if it's Kenyan, maybe it's not good, right? And you kind of need somebody to tell you that's a good book.
It's actually good.
Go and buy it, right?
The same goes for even movies and series that are on Netflix.
Yeah.
So you have to be told.
You have to be told it's actually nice,
Right.
right? But there's initial reluctance. You're not sure, yeah? And so the best thing was that people then started saying, this is a good book. But in the beginning, you know, we couldn't figure out, where does it go? Africa section? Right? And I was like, I want to be right next to my competitors, you know, put me next to those, you know, those books that are coming from all these other countries. I want Super Lisa there on that shelf, you know? And in the end, you know, they put them everywhere, in the Africa section, in the preteen section, in this is that, just to test the market. Where would people go and pick this book from? What do people think about a new product on the market? Yeah? So I think it was challenging introducing it, right? From this first one, there's been a real difference once the second one has come out, because now people know.
Right.
A lot of people enjoyed this. A lot of people haven't connected within years. Send me a message, I saw your book in the bookstore, my kids love it.
Oh.
Those are the messages I've started getting.
Right.
People just reaching out to me through different forms of social media saying, I saw your book, well done, my kids love it.
Right. And talking about the business as well, does it pay? The business part of it?
Does it pay? I mean, I think I'm too early in the journey to say I'm going to quit my day job. Certainly not, right? But there's a lot of satisfaction from it. And I think you can look at pay in many different ways. I've started going to schools. I've started having conversations with children that I wasn't having before.
Right.
And to me, what that has done in terms of nourishing my spirit, that payment is something I can't put in money. It's such a wonderful experience. I ask them, what do they read? And they tell me all the things they're reading, and none of them are even African content, you know? I'm just having a conversation with them. What do you read? Do you like reading? And they will all say, yes, I like reading. And the things they read, you know, of course, Harry Potter and this, all these kind of favorites, you know, Dog Diaries, you know, Big Nate. They tell me they read all these things. Then our conversation moves and we start talking about superheroes. Spider-Man and, you know, Where do superheroes come from? America. They all come from the West somewhere. All there, you know? And you can see their mind churning when you say, well, where do they come from? If you tell stories and people say it's from the imagination, if stories can come from the imagination, that means superheroes can come from, and you sort of see the penny dropping and it's like, anywhere.
Right.
Yes.
We can have superheroes right here.
We can have superheroes right here. It's all about who tells the story. So I think if I went to it with a, it would be a different conversation.
Okay.
But I went into it because I wanted these kind of messages.
You saw that gap.
That gap.
Right.
That gap for me was important because I have young children and I don't want them growing up thinking, oh, there's nothing cool in Kenya. The coolness is coming from somewhere else.
Road.
Yeah, you know, and there's so much cool stuff. There's so much cool stuff.
Right, like we are cool people.
We are cool people. We
are.
are totally cool people. Exactly, right? And I hope this encourages people to start telling their own stories and writing more books. Actually, I'm surprised a number of people have started reaching out to me saying, I'm trying to write a book. Can you help me? And I've had different conversations with people. Write those books. Write those stories.
Right.
You know, and I really want to encourage people to do that because we have so much to offer. Let's not doubt ourselves. Let's not doubt Kenyan content. Let's support it, create it.
Right. And for someone who's a writer,
Yes.
I know writers complain about a writer's block.
Yes.
There can be a lot of those challenges.
Yes.
But for someone who's looking to put out a product into the
Yes,
market,
yes.
what would you tell them?
So writer's block, you know, I kind of wondered if I had it. I found some books easier to write than others.
Okay.
What I would say is don't put pressure on yourself, yeah? Just write as the ideas come. I'm very old school. I walk around with a notebook. Sometimes I see something, I read something, it gives me an idea, I write it.
Okay.
Just a one-liner, you know, and I park it there. And I build the story slowly as my imagination comes with an idea.
Okay.
So I don't put pressure on myself and say, I'm going to sit in a room 1 hour, I must write this book.
Today must finish this book.
Today I must finish, yeah? I think that adds a lot of anxiety to the process. My process is just organic. I'm sitting something gives me an idea, I jot it down, I'll come back to it later. And some mornings I wake up, I just feel like, you know what, I want to write something. I'll even just write one paragraph. I get stuck on a story somewhere, I just leave it, I let it sit. When I'm doing something, I run a lot or doing something that is relaxing me, something falls into place. So just don't put pressure on yourself, follow your own process. Follow your own process. Don't try and follow someone else's and don't put pressure on yourself. Follow your own process.
Right. So I know there can be a difference. Maybe some people think better in the
Yes,
morning.
exactly.
So just depending.
Listen to yourself. Listen to those moments. And I think it's a kind of a self-awareness journey. Listening to yourself and understanding when you work best and what your process is. And following that, really kind of trusting that.
Right. And as we continue to encourage the reading culture.
Yes.
And not only among children.
Yes.
But also to the general public
Yes,
as well.
Yes.
How would you say someone who's looking to just reading more in 2023
Yeah.
as a resolution?
As a resolution.
I want to read more books. I want to enhance my vocabulary.
Yeah.
I just want to be a better thinker,
Yes.
creative thinker.
Yes.
So what would your advice be? What are the steps to take?
So there's several things. I mean, basically now I kind of probably read around 2 books a month. And that's a good pace for me because I read a little bit at night, every day, every evening, right? I look at a lot of recommendations, reviews.
Okay.
You know, if I'm starting out, I will start by asking a few people.
Right.
Tell me a really good book you've read lately, right? Somebody will tell you 2 or 3 recommendations. Say, I'm looking for something in this type of genre. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Tell me something good you've read. And by the time the 3rd person is telling you the same book, I write it. My husband laughs at me on my phone. I have the longest book list ever. I go, I check it out on Goodreads, you know, whatever. I see the reviews, I read it, I say, okay, that goes on my book list.
Right.
And it's about being deliberate. You sit there with these goals, but be deliberate about it. Go into the bookstore. Even the whole set of like fiction, what's new, and not just gravitating towards really understanding what interests you and responding to that.
Right.
Yeah, being very genuine about it. Go with what interests you. There's no point in picking up a book that you've heard, okay, someone's talked about, but you have no interest in, I don't know, it's a non-fiction something, or it's a detective, like I'm saying, and that bores you to death, right? Be deliberate about what interests you and start feeding that.
Okay.
You like detective, you like murder mystery, you like something, you like romantic comedy sort of books.
And that's what you go for.
That's what you go for.
Okay. And there are people who walk around with books till the book was new, then it starts following the dog ears.
Yeah.
It's in the handbag.
Yeah.
Then they're walking with it
Yeah.
in a vehicle.
Yeah,
Then they're out.
I love it. Yes, I love it. I walk around with a book. I'm one of those people. I love it. I mean, then you just, that 5 minutes you're delayed, 10 minutes you're waiting for a meeting. That 20 minutes your taxi has cancelled on you 5 times and you're sitting there waiting. You have a book.
Get a few pages down.
You get a few pages down.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yolanda. And thank you for this conversation and reading, a very important part of ourselves.
Yes.
And of course, kids that we're trying to bring up.
Yeah.
And even as they open school
Yes.
in just about 2 weeks.
Yes.
Looking to see how that will go. Perhaps we'll have this conversation yet again.
I hope so. I mean, I hope parents will think about it and enjoy this conversation. And it's all just about being deliberate about what your children are reading and making sure there's that diversity in the content and supporting the Kenyan stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And that is all we had for you in the morning conversation. Nancy Nelima here, and I've been speaking to Yolanda Chakava, who is the author of Super Lisu. Now you can go in and get this book. But did you say where we could get it from?
It's available in all leading bookstores. That book number 2 is currently Textbook Center's Kids Club Book of the Month. And yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And of course, you can access this book in all the bookstores, in all the big bookstores in the country as of right now. And this is where we sign out, and I'd like to encourage you to at least read a book today.
Yay!
And we're out. See you again tomorrow. Goodbye.